All right, so the purpose of this screencast is to talk you through structuring and analyzing argument essay for a single text and visual language analysis. This will be particularly relevant for you if you're studying VC English Units 1 and 2, because you're only really expected to do a single text and visual language analysis in those two units, and it changes a little in Unit 3 and 4. Analyzing argument is also known as language analysis, but the name change is very deliberate because the focus is not just on the language being used, but more so there's more emphasis on the arguments and how they are constructed in order to position or convey position audiences or convey a particular point of view on an issue. So this PowerPoint is a condensed version of some sections of these resources. So the Analyzing and Presenting Argument textbooks by Ryan Johnston. The old one is in the middle, then the latest edition is on the left, and a document called Structuring a Language Analysis Essay, which is on our Tintern portal. So it may not surprise you to know that this essay has an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion, like most essays that you write in secondary school. In case you are forgetting this, perhaps this can help you. So the introduction is like the head, the conclusion is like the tail, and the body paragraphs are like the body, like a fish. The head of a fish, the body of a fish, and the tail of a fish. So let's talk through each of the components. So in the introduction, there's the background to the issue, author of the text, contention of the text, key arguments, form of the text, audience tones, if there's more than one, and also the title of the text. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to include this many sentences, because of course you can concisely express all of these things in maybe 2 or 3 sentences, but these are the things that you need to include in your introduction. I'm very well aware that this acronym is BACFAT, which is inspired by a previous student who went out of her way to form her own acronym in order to try and remember what goes into an introduction. So BACFAT, for those of you who use those kind of techniques to memorize. Interestingly enough, when I was looking up a picture to complement this slide, most of the pictures were about either getting rid of your back fat, or a lot of the images were actually of women, which I think is a fair reflection of our society today. Alright, body paragraphs. Now, body paragraphs, because this is analyzing argument, should be focused on key arguments, because of course the goal of this outcome is to analyze how arguments and language have been put together and used to convey a point of view about an issue. So your body paragraphs are focused on the key arguments in the sense that you're focusing on what those arguments are, or what that argument is, obviously per body paragraph, and how the author uses language to convey their argument, and why the author uses language in this way, to position the audience to think, feel, believe, or respond to something in a certain way. Okay, so this is a conceptual way of thinking about what goes into your body paragraphs, right? What being the key argument, how being the language and the language techniques, and why and how is the analysis. Now, just a quick note that I often find students tend to resort to these kinds of statements, like the language is used to engage the audience, to draw their attention to something, to encourage them to read on, to make them interested in something. That's a big no-no, right? Those are all really general terms. They don't actually get to the point of the outcome, right? Which is essentially, why is the language used and how is it used? To say that language is used to engage the audience, well, that's obvious, right? But then how does it engage the audience, and what is it engaging them on? If you prefer a more concrete way of thinking about your body paragraphs, you might want to just resort to teal. Personally, I don't like teal because I think it's restrictive, but I know it can be helpful. So with any teal structure, you obviously have a topic sentence, which in this case should be a key argument with a strong author verb, right? So for example, Smith asserts that something, something, something. Then you can apply TL in this sense when you're talking about the language techniques. Include a technique or a language choice. An example, quote from the text, a word or a phrase, please, not a whole sentence or a whole passage, because you are wanting to do close analysis, not broad. The effect of the language or the language technique, and linking it back to how it supports the key argument overall. These are some examples of author verbs. So author verbs are essentially a way of describing the way that the author is trying to bring across their point, the way that they're using language, the way that they're using a technique. And these are called connectives. Connectives are useful words or phrases at the start of sentences that you can use for several different reasons. One, to build or add one point to another, to contrast one point to another, or to lead to the end of a train of thought. Now, in this analysis, you don't just analyze the written verbal text, but you also analyze the visual language, i.e., for example, a photograph, a graphic, or an illustration, or a cartoon, or something like that. Now, how do you incorporate that? Well, you either write it in a separate body paragraph, you write your analysis in a separate body paragraph, or you integrate your analysis into a key argument body paragraph and explain how it supports or presents a different perspective. So here's an example of that. This is an example of where you incorporate it into your essay by focusing one of your body paragraphs specifically on the visual language, whereas a more sophisticated approach might do something like this, where it incorporates it into an existing body paragraph because you are expected to talk about how the visual language supports or provides a different perspective on the issue that is being discussed. Now, your conclusion is very straightforward. I know that summarizing in itself can be a difficult skill, but this video is only really about the structure, not about the skill itself. So in your conclusion, all you need to do is restate the author's contention, or the author's apostrophe after the S if there's more than one, and summarize the key arguments in support of the contention. Okay, it only needs to be 2 to 3 sentences long. Don't include any new information. It's just there to summarize. Now, if you would like to look at some samples, then of course these resources are extremely useful because there are samples within them. Of course, in class we'll be looking at samples ourselves, but this gives you a broad idea of how you can structure and approach your single text plus visual language analysis in this outcome called Analyzing Argument.